teaching techniques that we can borrow for the communicative language classroom. That's quite a title. History teaching techniques that we can borrow for the communicative language classroom. What is history teaching techniques that we can borrow for the communicative? That's 12 words long. 12 words. I mean, I always say don't ever make your title more than 5 words. That's ridiculous. That's like a whole book. I'll be surprised if anybody turns up. And also, what is that? Is that a railway track? What's that got to do with history? Yeah, I don't know about this. I don't know if I'm going to stay for this. I think I'm just... No, I think I will stay. Hello, everybody. I've said, hey, everyone, thanks you for joining. I've put in my message. Please say hello. And we've had hello, Siv, and hello, Andy. And, oh, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. You know, I didn't know if anyone would come. Spent all day getting ready. And here you are. Yes. Is anybody here, or is anybody taking part in their first ever LessonStream Live? If you are, then a special welcome. You know, this is. I think this is our 4th LessonStream Live. I want to start doing this every week, but we're really just kind of finding our way at the moment. And the idea is just to talk story and storytelling for the classroom, kind of with one eye on language teaching, but not necessarily. We can go beyond that, like today. And if it's all about story, I can't think of a much better topic than history. Story and history are inseparable. And in Spain here, people even get confused between the two words when they're learning English. What is the difference between story and history? And you know, don't you? I don't need to tell you the differences. Of course not. But it confuses some people. I always say, well, history is kings and queens and that. Stories are general, personal anecdotes and that. And I love history. Do you enjoy history? I have a real passion for it. That doesn't mean I'm good at remembering names and dates and the like, but why should that be the case? You know, I love film. I love watching films. Doesn't mean I can remember all the names of actors and directors. You know, a passion for it doesn't mean that we get all the nuts and bolts, but unfortunately, that's what it's all so often reduced to, isn't it? Now, we've got Anthony here. I'm very interested. Anthony's is a history teacher, and you work with B1, B2, and C1 level students. This is great, Anthony. I'm really happy that we've got a history teacher in the house. Hello, everybody else that said hello, that I've not said hello to back. I can see you all there. And, you know, the great thing with these LessonStream Lives or any live events or any streaming events is you can just leave me on. And in the background, if some of you might be cooking, some of you might be washing up, just have me on in the background. I don't mind. I'm quite happy to be that background person. And I certainly didn't get my love of history from school. I wonder if you share a similar experience to me. Don't forget, this is decades ago. I think maybe going back to the 1980s. And there's one history teacher in particular that I remember. I'd be very surprised if he's still around because he was quite an elderly man. I don't want to tell you his real name, so we're going to call him Mr. Hastings, which I think would be a good name for a history teacher. Don't you agree? Mr. Hastings. And Mr. Hastings, he seemed like a nice enough man. He just didn't seem to have any passion for the subject, and he used to teach us by dictation. He'd stand at the front of the class and read a passage about, I don't know, the American Civil War, and I suppose it was one way to shut us up, to his credit, and we'd just sit there and write down what we were being dictated, the ideas it would be coming out his mouth and going into our minds. I think I developed I became really good at being able to write down what was being dictated without engaging with it at all, without processing it at all. I mean, he could have been dictating anything. I was just taking it down verbatim, able to think about other things. So it'd be, I think maybe I've often remembered that as a language teacher, that you've got to take that into account. It won't always end up in the students taking away the message or even thinking, engaging with the meaning. And there's one thing I remember, not an incident, a recurring incident from those days of history with Mr. Hastings, not his real name, remember. You see, we used to have Mr. Hastings for history, the last session every Friday, and it lasted 1 hour and 10 minutes. And oh my God, the weekend was so close. You could almost touch it. But oh no, we had Mr. Hastings standing between us and the weekend. And sometimes I think Mr. Hastings was so tired as well with the week that what he would do, rather than teach us, he would give us a slideshow. This is what it was like. Those of you young teachers that don't remember what it was like before the days of YouTube or the internet, and I'm sure maybe you remember it from school, but I know there will be some young teachers amongst us. This is how it used to work, okay? Mr. Hastings would sit at the back of the class in control of a projector and all these images. And there'd be this audio player, tape recorder, big wheels spinning with a tape moving between it. And we'd be playing some monologue, some production about the First World War, let's say. And we'd all be sitting watching the projector, and there'd be images of the First World War, and we'd be listening to all these voices of people who had lived through it, and would be listening at the First World, old men usually, First World War, there was no hamburgers, and I didn't even know what a hamburger was. And I'm being really silly here. I can't remember what's, it was. You'll forgive me for trivializing something as horrific as the First World War. But and then there would be a little beep, and that would be the signal for Mr. Hastings to change the slide. You see, and something else about the trenches, blah blah blah, and all this beep, and we'd be going, oh God, look at the watch, and every now and again there'd be beep, but the slide would not change. Keep going, another voice talking, another beep, still the slide's not changed. We'd sort of slowly turn around and we'd see Mr. Hastings fast asleep. And suddenly we'd all go, and we'd wonder when he was going to wake up. And he would always wake up. And the thing is, he'd wake up and poor man, he would have no idea where he was supposed to be. He'd have no idea how many slides he had missed. So he'd start frantically going through the slides, and he'd always go too far, and he'd be trying to work out where he should be if he'd got to the right place, and it always got out of sync. And for the rest of the slideshow, he would never find the right slide. So we'd always be getting the wrong slide for what we were hearing. And there's no way he'd know if the right slide was before or after. Maybe he'd work it out, but I don't think it was hilarious. In fact, it used to brighten up history when that happened. Daniel says that he had a horrible history teacher as a kid, or horrible history teachers. You're learning more history now as you homeschool your daughter, and she's fascinated, and so are you, so much more engaged. It's interesting to hear. Daniel, we've spoken a few times before because you're in the LessonStream membership, and I didn't realize that you homeschool. That's interesting to hear. Hello, latecomers. Hello, Michael. Hello, Kate. Galina. Hello, Stergios. So scared of your history teacher that you heard nothing of what he was saying. Oh, that's fascinating. We used to have a history teacher that we were absolutely terrified of her. She was actually quite a good teacher. And I've spoken about her before as an example of a teacher that would never ever share anything about her life. As far as we were concerned, she was just terrifying. And she taught the subject quite well, but there was no sort of personalization of herself in it. And I think that always kind of took away from her lessons. And Ellie, I'm so happy that you can provide the voice of the participant here that had the good teacher. What made your I'd love to know what made your teacher good. How did your teacher instill a passion for history in you? What did your teacher do that you liked, that you enjoyed? Um, yes. Now, what I'm going to do for this session, I've got a few things. I'm not going to tell you where we're going. That's not the way it works. But I'm just going to throw some things at you, bring a few things out the hat. The story I just told you about Mr. Hastings is the first of two stories that I'd like to tell you. I'll tell you another one in a little while. But first of all, I'm going to do a quick activity. And this is an activity that I'm developing at the moment. It's half-baked. That means it's not finished. It's in production. But a part of it is, and that's the part I'm going to do with you to give you a sneak peek. If you're in the LessonStream membership, as some of you are, this is what's coming. I need my glasses, and they're over there. One moment. My glasses. Oh no, I've gone out of focus. Ah, no, this is what happens. Let me just try this. This is a disaster. This is my camera. Come on, camera. Focus in the hand. Focus in the hand. Back to me. Okay, let's see if I can just stop my. Hey, that's good to know. That happened last time. I had no idea what to do with it. Now I know what to do because it's quite a new experience. This. Do you want to see my new glasses? Some of you saw my glasses last time. The funny thing is about my new glasses is that by complete chance, I feel I have to point this out. Otherwise, you're going to think they are, look, the same color as the LessonStream blue. It was a mistake. But they are almost, look, they're exactly the same color. I don't know how that happened. Now, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you a situation. All right, this is an activity. It's an activity that's in development, as I mentioned. It involves a situation, and I'm going to pretend that I am your teacher. Now, I could be your history teacher, but this is really about language teaching. It's about creating situations in our language classroom, in our communicative classrooms, in which we're immersing our students in English. That's what it's all about in my mind. You know, it's not just about standing at the board teaching grammar, is it? It's not about vocabulary lists, although it can be. That should supplement it. But really, I want to be able to engage my students by immersing them in meaningful language. And history is such a good way to do this. Ellie, in response to the question, she said she's got a really good teacher. When I said, what made your teacher so good? Small dialogues, which is fantastic because this is what this is all about. Jana's got some new glasses too. You have to let us see a picture of your glasses, Jana. You could share them in the Facebook group. So this is the situation, okay? And I may ask some questions, and feel free to answer my questions rather, in the chat, all right? So let me give you this situation. Imagine this, and if you were my students, there'd be a lot of language priming, language activation, or if we want to call it language pre-teaching before this stage. So we will take that part as read. You are a nation state, a fictitious nation state. And you've got some big ambitions, all right? Imagine this. For years now, you've watched these other nations and countries all over the world build up their empires. Now it's your turn. So this is a fictitious situation involving a fictitious nation state. You've got these ambitions, big ambitions. For years, you've watched these other nations and other countries build up their empires. Now it's your turn. You see, recently, your population has been rising. Your economy has become more industrialized, but you lack significant natural resources. So it's time to expand. My question for you here is, what do you do? Looking for a general answer here. What do you do? So you're this nation state, you've got big ambitions, you've watched other nations build up their empires. You know what? I said this is an activity in development. I'm going to just make a change here. I'm going to take out this line that says you've watched other nations build up their empires. Now it's your turn, because that kind of gives you the answer. Let me start again. You're a nation state with ambitions. Recently, your population has been rising. Your economy has become more industrialized, but you lack significant natural resources. What do you do? Ellie says, war. War. I mean, war could be a kind of effect or an outcome of what you would do. I think, would you agree with me, Ellie, that probably most countries would want to avoid war if they can, unless they've got vested interests, actually, maybe economic interests. They would want to avoid war. They want, most countries, I would guess, and maybe you can think of a situation I'd be wrong. A lot of countries want to get things, but war might be a byproduct of them doing so. So, if your answer here is invade, so I would say let's not conflate invasions with wars. Because you can you can invade a country. Maybe I'm wrong here, because this is the first time I've had this conversation. I'm thinking here that if you were going to invade a country, ideally that country would just let you walk in and take what you want with minimal resistance. Make deals, says Galina. Trade machines for bread and potatoes. So there's a lot of. Anthony says League of Nations role play. Anthony, just going back here, who was the history teacher? It's you, Anthony. So I'd love to hear. Anthony, I've got my eyes on you. I'd love to know what you've got to say about this, because I am not a history teacher, and I am learning as I go along here. Okay, so there's actually some interesting answers here. Negotiate, trade. What am I going straight for the invasions for? So let me just in this story, in this scenario that I've created, tourism. Yeah, there's lots of things we can do, aren't there? In my fictitious scenario that I've created here, you have your eye on a certain territory. You've got your eye on a certain territory. It's a territory. It's a fictitious territory, and it is to your west. Let me show you this territory. Okay, this is the territory, and you are just somewhere to the east of this territory. Okay, and interestingly, you have some influence here already. Do you know what this dotted line is? Can you guess what this dotted line is? It's a railway track. I know you know that. And you actually control a part of the railway track in this country. And so this control of the railway track has allowed you to increase your presence and political interest in this territory. Now, this is really important, because recently you have just won a war, a major war in your development, in your own history. And it was quite unexpected. And it's caused the world is now taking you seriously. If it wasn't taking you seriously beforehand, it certainly is now. And so you are thinking of your imperial ambitions here. Now, this is I'm trying this out for the first time, so I'm almost starting to see that I'm pushing you in a certain direction. But I think it'd be nice to. There's some nice ideas here, but you lacking these natural resources. What do you do? And we listen to all your answers here, and we go back into the story. So let me just go back over the situation here because we've almost finished the situation. It's quite a short text. So you are a nation state with ambitions. Recently, your population has been rising. Your economy has become more industrialized, but you lack significant natural resources. So what do you do? We've explored some examples. Now, what you want to do in this situation is you want to expand. For years, you've watched these other nations build up their empires. Now it's your turn. Recently, you've just won a war with another big player, and now the world is taking you seriously. It's time for you to put your ambitions into action, your imperial ambitions into action. And there's a certain territory that you have your eye on. It's that one right there. You already have some influence here. You control a part of the railway system, and this has allowed you to increase your economic presence and political interest in this new territory. However, and I didn't mention this before, you are not alone. There's a competitor also in this country, also with rival ambitions, and they also control a part of the railway system. You control that south part, they control the north part. Now, you have a lot of faith in your military capabilities. You think you can become the dominant force here in the territory. So, and also your competitor is the one that you've just won the war with. Now it's time for you to invade. This is it. You want to invade. You want to invade. There's a lot of questions here. I think what's ethical questions. I mean, what's this? Civ says an example: help build industry in underdeveloped countries and control their natural resources in the name of payment. Real-time examples: China using Sri Lanka. That's interesting. Civ, which country are you in? I know you're based in India, aren't you? Remind us where you are. I'd like to hear more about that. What's to stop you invading? If we're going to take as read the ethical challenge here or the ethical reasons not to, what does any country need in order to invade? We hope. And I don't want to assume there's just one answer to this question, although there is a certain answer I'm looking at here. I mean, you can't, can you? You can't just launch an unprovoked attack, can you? I mean, if you were to launch an unprovoked attack on this territory in front of you, that would be illegal. You would have the weight of the international community come down on you. You need money. Now, Ellie, you've got the resources already. You've got the military might. Andy, I think sanctions is what you don't need. Don't forget, Andy, you are the invader here. You are the party that's about to invade this territory from within. You have control of the southern part of this railway, and so you can you're already in this territory. You can take it over. You can invade it from within. You've got the weapons, Jana. You've got the technology. You've got the soldiers. You've got everything you need from a military point of view. Anthony, the history teacher, this is, and I'm not saying this is the only answer, but this is the one that I'm looking at. You need a pretext. Exactly. You need a pretext. Now, there's a term that I've seen recently. It's a Latin word, a casus belli, which is Latin for occasion for war, an act or an event that provokes or is used to justify war. And I think this is what every invading nation or army needs, at least in a modern world. I mean, I think then what would your pretext be? I mean, I suppose the question would be then, when is this happening? You'd be assuming that this is happening here and now. But I guess the pretext would be different according to when you are in history, right? Obviously, this is a time where we've got railway systems, but the Mehmet II, what was his pretext for invading Constantinople? As far as I understand, the pretext was the challenge, the fact that it had been attempted about 20 times before, and the fact that you could take it was reason enough to do it. I'd love to know what you think about this, Anthony. Or invasions, if that's what we would call them, of Britain going into India, or the likes of any of the European countries, whether it's France or Britain or Italy or Belgium or the Netherlands going to Africa. The pretext there, the reason would be quite simply, we're doing it for these people. We're saving themselves from themselves, which is incredible how that could be used back when it was used. Interesting. So let's go back. Now, what I'm looking for here is a solution, okay? And forget that you're the nice people that you are, okay? You are aggressive. You are an aggressive nation state. For all these years, you've watched these other nation states claiming their empires, claiming their resources. You've been behaving yourself. Now you've got the might. Now you've got the strength. Now you've got the determination. The only thing you don't have is an excuse to take over this territory, to invade it from inside. So what do you do? What do you do? I'm watching your... Okay, so, well, Ellie, this is because let's say this could be any time that there were railways, because there are railways in this story. So we could say, late 19th century up until now. Janus is a pretext, a lie, hiding the true reason for your invasion. This is really interesting. Yes. Why not? Why not? So what do you do? Now, a surprise attack. Now, surprise attacks, Stergios, would be certainly what you would do, but a surprise attack is not your pretext. It doesn't give you a reason, because what you want to do is you want to tell the rest of the world, look, we're invading this territory, but we have a good reason for doing so. If it looks to the international community, if it looks as if you are invading a territory for your own interests and your own gain, then you're going to get into trouble. You can't just go around doing that. And Andy says that the Germans faked an attack in Poland as a pretext for invading Poland. That's exactly... There's a parallel there with here. Now, let me just go over this again, because what I told you that this was a fictitious situation. In fact, it's not. And Anthony says, Anthony, our resident history teacher, said that he uses this kind of situation to teach the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. And I know, Anthony, that you Are you know what's going on here? A little wink from Anthony there, because this is what you see in front of you is Manchuria. Let me just show you Manchuria. If you don't know where Manchuria is the northeast part of China. Manchuria is northeast China. That's it right there. And the railway system we're looking at is, let me just blow this up. Whoops, that was the wrong way. That red line that you see going from Moscow, running there from Moscow to Vladivostok, is the Trans-Siberian Railway. And if we look at this little area within the red circle, that is, this is called the Chinese Eastern Railway. Now, there's two ways you can do it. The main Trans-Siberian Railway goes around China into in Russian territory, but back at the turn of the 20th century, the Russians constructed this railway actually inside Manchuria, inside northeastern China, and that's that you see in purple, and that's what this is all about. Now, let me just tell you the context here. So Russia constructed this railway, which was ready to use in around 1902. And they had permission. There was relations with China. So China not only allowed them to construct this railway, but China also leased out a port there, which was then called Port Arthur, on that little tip of the purple, the southern branch. Now, Japan went to war with Russia and won in 1905. If you know your Russian history and you're into Nicholas II pushing this war against Russia was a big part of his demise. It was a very, very bad strategy. They didn't expect Japan to win at all. He thought he had everything that he needed to beat Japan. So it was a complete surprise victory from Japan. And this pushed Japan onto the stage as a world power, a force to be reckoned with. And so Japan had its sights on Manchuria. And what happened was eventually Japan, and through its China and Russia later went to war in what year was it, Anthony? 1929. And that was the Soviet Red Army. And what happened about this? Tell you the problem here. I took my glasses off. Never do that. Bad time. So much better. Yes. Make these notes. You spend time making notes and you can't even read them because you take your glasses off. So 1929, the Red Army went to war with China, and the Red Army won, and it increased all these tensions in the area and reasserted Soviet control over the railway. But Japan was given control of this. It already had it. I'm giving you a really, really bad synopsis here. Basically, Japan had a lot of influence inside, and this is all you need to know. Japan had a lot of influence inside this area. Russia also had influence, but Japan had beaten Russia at a war. Japan fancied itself as a world player. Japan wanted to invade. So what they did is, Anthony, what did they do? They blew up a little bit of dynamite. They used a little bit of dynamite to blow up a little part of the railway track. And they said that it was some Chinese insurgents that did that. And this was their excuse. This was their pretext. It was a lie. And they used this as an excuse to mount a full-scale invasion in Manchuria. Now, apologies for that badly told story. Why am I telling you this story? Or rather, why have I chosen this story to introduce this idea? There's three things. There's three reasons. There's just three things I'd like to say here. The first thing is, let me go back to my teacher, Mr. Hastings. And to be fair to Mr. Hastings, I can't be sure if this was him. But what I remember one day in history as a child, as a teenager, all those years ago, I was sitting in my history class, and our teacher was talking about the Manchurian incident, which is exactly what I've just said. This is called the Manchurian incident. This time when Japan decided to blow up a little bit of their own railway track, blame it on the Chinese as a pretext, as an excuse to launch a full-scale invasion in the northeast of China. And I remember this moment where I'm thinking, why on earth are we studying this? Someone blew up a little piece of railway track in somewhere in China, like what, 55 years ago? WTH? Why on earth? What has it got anything? Why has it got anything to do with anything? What's it got to do with me? I just did not get it. I was so perplexed and I was so bored that I actually remember it. You know, we usually forget boring things, but I remember being so meaningfully bored that I remembered this, you see. That's the first thing I wanted to say about it. That's why I've chosen this as a case study. That's the first thing, because I've got a very personal connection with the Manchurian incident. I hold it as at the time I was more bored than any other time in my life in history. The second thing I wanted to do is I wanted to demonstrate something I think teachers of history do. Anthony, I'd love to hear from you, is not to go straight for the facts, not to go straight for the people, the dates, the places, but to withdraw, or rather withhold, I should say, some of the information, to make it faceless, to make it locationless, to make it timeless, to take a moment from history and to present it as it could be anywhere relating to any of us. And also to bring you into the picture, to give you the role of this invading country, which I don't think I did particularly well, but as I mentioned before, this is very experimental. So to, you know, and then once we've discussed some of the issues from it, then we can go to the specifics. Okay, so we've looked at some of the issues here, we've looked at some of the ideas here. Then we go to the where, the what, the who, and the when. All of these pieces of information which are important, but can come later. But history is so often taught, or at least it used to, I should say, so often used to be taught with these facts coming first. And that's why I think it used to drive me crazy. So the first reason is I've got this personal connection. I was so bored as a child, the Manchurian incident. The second, I wanted to use it as a kind of way to demonstrate how we can make it, withhold information and make it timeless. The third reason is there's this term I keep seeing in the media recently, and it's come up. I don't think anybody's actually mentioned this term. I'm reading through your comments, but we've definitely referred to it. Let me just show you what I'm talking about here. This was US claims Russia planning a false flag operation to justify Ukraine invasion. Now, has anybody else seen this as a term? Has anyone else heard of this as a term? Because up until a few weeks ago, I had never heard of this term false flag, which is in air. It's not actually, no, those are not air inverted commas, are they? Because it's actually written. It's only when we do that. And just look at this. If you go into the Guardian website and you type into the search false flag, then you come to dozens and dozens of examples of this phrase being used, specifically in the context of the Russia-Ukraine situation that we have right now. And if you go into Wikipedia and if you type in false flag, it will tell you that a false flag event is, it's an act which is committed with the intent of disguising the actual source of responsibility and pinning blame on another party. In other words, if you want to invade or attack or go to war with somebody else and you're needing an excuse, a pretext, a false flag would be something that you do maliciously and blame somebody else for it so you can invade them and go to war with them. And this Manchurian incident, this railway explosion, is a perfect example of a false flag incident. Sometimes it's regarded as the perfect example of the false flag incident. I think it was Andy that mentioned, was it you that mentioned Hitler's invasion of Poland? That's referred to as the Gleisfitz incident. And exactly, this is another good example of a false flag incident. We don't have to go into what it was, but Germany carried out a few attacks and blamed the Poles for doing it. Then they had an excuse for going to war. Also, there's a very interesting example coming from the early 1960s, referred to as Operation Northwoods, which is when this came to light that there was a plan for the US government. It was never actually carried out, but they wanted a reason to go to war, to attack Cuba, their rival on doorstep, posing a big threat to them because of the potential of their alliance with Russia. And they were looking for a reason to go to war with Cuba. They had the idea, they had a number of different ideas. One of them was to assassinate ex-Cuban citizens that were now American citizens. So you got these people citizens of Cuba who had defected and they'd managed to get American citizenship. So they were now American citizens. And of course, Castro didn't like that, did he? He was never happy with Cuban citizens defecting. So the Americans, if they were to assassinate some of these ex-Cuban citizens now living in America and blame them on nefarious undercover Cuban activities, then they could say, look, Castro has ordered the assassination, the murder of some American citizens. Now we have an excuse to invade Cuba. This never happened, but it's another great example of a false flag. So those are the three reasons I've chosen this. Can I just let me make a general point here that I think that if you're good at history, what does that mean? I certainly have a passion for history, but what would it mean to say that you're good at history? I think if we can compare history with language learning, we talk about declarative knowledge, and if we talk about declarative knowledge in language learning, declarative knowledge is facts that you can recite. So you could talk about the rules of different tenses or when you would use this structure. Or you know the vocabulary, you could name 12 different parts of the body, let's say. That's declarative knowledge. Similarly, in history, declarative knowledge might be able to cite the different dates and the kings and queens in England in the right order, and the 12 reasons why this happened or why that happened, and all these sort of things that we have to learn by heart when we're learning history. In language learning, we also talk about another kind of knowledge, which is procedural knowledge, which is much more it's much deeper, isn't it? It's the kind of knowledge that we have to draw on when we're speaking, much more unconscious. It's the knowledge that we have to, it comes from working on it. It's not just something you can sit down and learn. It comes from working on your fluency, from co-constructing texts, let's say, from conversation. And that is exactly what we can also apply to history, I would say. Procedural knowledge in history might be, as I would understand it, let's say being able to make connections, looking at this problem right now with the Russia and the Ukraine affair and saying, you could relate this, make a connection back to the Japanese invasion of Manchuria. When you read in the paper, that is, that, there's a possibility, if Putin wanted to invade, he would need a false flag incident. And this is something that's been spoken about. And you can make that connection like that with Japan and Manchuria. It's not my intention here to make this at all political, just to really draw attention to these different, make a parallel. What do you think about that? Anyone here got a little sister? My little sister, I'm not scared to say it. I wouldn't say it if she was here, but she used to be a little shit. My little sister used to be a little shit. You know what she used to do? And I'm just going to, Anthony, I want to read your comment here. Declarative knowledge gets you the what and when, but doesn't get the students the why and how. Andy, asking you a question here. Sorry. Absolutely. I'm reading that thinking that you've just written procedural. I'm assuming that you don't actually use these terms in history, Andy, but I might be wrong. Do you use the terms declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge in history? I wouldn't know, but I would be surprised if you do, because I would have thought they come much more from language learning and language teaching, but I have no idea. But absolutely, declarative knowledge is that deeper understanding. And they say that what's the point in history if we don't learn from history? What's the point in history if we're just learning dates? Absolutely. Apologies there's a lot of good comments have come out of your come out of this chat. And apologies that I've missed a lot of them, but thank you for leaving them. My little sister, right? This is what she used to do. I remember this at breakfast time. We'd be sitting at a table. And I'd be minding my own business as I always did, eating my cornflakes. Back in those days, we didn't have mobile phones, did we? So what we had to do was read the back of cornflakes packets. And so anything but talk to my little sister. And my little sister, she would edge towards me. And her aim here is she'd want to get as close to me as possible without actually touching me, to totally invade my personal space. And it drove me crazy. And I would start whining, "Get off, get away from me." And she'd say, "But I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you." And she'd be trying to elicit a response out of me, you see. So she would be, basically what she'd be doing, she'd be wanting me to actually hit her. And eventually I would give her maybe a hit, and then she'd immediately start crying. And then my mother would turn around, yell at us. She'd say, "Jamie, what on earth are you doing? You should know better, And my sister was the strategist, if I could pronounce that word right, I always want to say strategist, but they're strategist. I don't know if I've ever known how to pronounce that word, but that's what she did. She was a mastermind. Oh, God. I should tell you that I have grown to like my little sister despite this nonsense. But I've heard Putin say a few times, the Putin narrative. He says, we can do whatever we like inside our country. If we want to put troops all along the border, we can do whatever we like in our country. And I said, I don't want to make this political, but I would like to point out to Putin that he stole that from my little sister. Putin, that's my little sister's trick, all right? Yes. Let me just I wanted really one last thing. I think that history is such a great subject for language teachers. Ellie's going. Thanks, Ellie. It's such a fantastic subject because it's story based, and that's what that I think. Being biased, let's say that's my attraction to history as a subject. I think the very first time I ever realized the potential for it goes back to about 10 years ago. I was teaching a group of Chinese students in Norwich, and Norwich is a town in the United Kingdom, and Norwich has a fantastic cathedral built by the Normans. And one of the day trips for the Chinese students I was teaching was they were going to to go to visit the cathedral, and they were very interested about the history, and particularly wanted to know who these people, the Normans, were. So I promised them that I would prepare a lesson plan for them on the Normans. And I went home that day, and my aim was to find a text. Find a good, concise, and yet comprehensive text, giving them an overview of the Normans, what they did, what they got up to, and maybe also a little bit about what they were doing specifically in Norwich. And I was starting to get really, really involved, doing that terrible thing that we do as teachers. We spend hours planning lessons. And I'd spent about half an hour already, and I was thinking, if I was starting to write my own text based on 3 or 4 different Wikipedia articles. I go, this is crazy, And I actually, as one of my little areas of interest in history, I happen to be quite passionate about the Normans. And I thought, why am I sourcing all these texts from Wikipedia and the internet when I know about the Normans? And I felt a little bit kind of unconfident because I didn't know if I knew the facts. I didn't know my dates. I didn't know the names of people. I didn't know when they came to Norwich. I didn't know a lot, but I had a basic understanding of the Normans. So I just decided to put all my lesson planning away, and I went into the classroom and I said, okay, we're going to do something here. I'm going to tell you everything I know about the Normans. It was slightly prepared. And so I was able to pre-teach them some words. And I invited these Chinese teachers. They loved to film me, just because they like to keep a record of the language. And so one of them said, "Can we film you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I spoke for about 10 minutes, told them what I knew about the Normans and why I found it such a fascinating time in history. And I was able, I think, to instill some of my passion for the Normans in them. And then as a task, I said, okay, what I want you to do is fact check. I was able to make use of a lot of phrases of hedging. For example, I can't be sure, but I think maybe, or I might be mistaken, but, and this actually became the language focus. So we had the content and we had the language, and the content was the Normans, and the language focus was phrases for hedging. And they were then able to go on to Wikipedia and check my facts, or not necessarily check my facts because I'd hedged them, fill in the gaps when I'd hedged them or marked them for a gap in the information, they were able to go and find out the answers. And they were able to then watch that video, make a list of questions they wanted to find out, then go onto the internet and answer those questions. That was when I first realized this is what history teachers do. I'm sure history teachers are storytellers. I'm sure that Anthony, I'm sure you are an awesome history teacher. And I'm sure that Anthony, one of the things you do is, or you don't shy away from, is to use your own passion from the subject as a storyteller. And you know, this informed me as a teacher, this experience. And that really takes me to the end of this session today. Now, you can go if you like now, but in fact, I've got one more story I want to tell you. If you're doing the washing up, if you are preparing dinner or anything like that, just, you know, keep the video running, listen if you like. Just before you go, and just before I tell you that story, I'd like to just tell you a little bit about the LessonStream membership, if you permit me. This is as I mentioned, this is a work in progress. I'm working on this as an activity. Anthony, if you wouldn't mind, I would like, could you get in touch with me, Anthony? Could you send me an email? Because I would love to source your expertise as your consultancy on this. And I'll give you a little something for your time. All right. How does that sound? And if you could get in touch, I would love to work on you for this lesson plan. So this lesson plan is going to be a collaborative collaboration between Anthony and myself. It's going to be coming in, I don't know, 10 days, I hope. Maybe this weekend, if not next weekend. I've got another activity lined up for this weekend. This is for the LessonStream membership. If you join the LessonStream membership, you get instant access to all 90, that's 90 lesson plans. And I upload a new lesson plan most weeks. So there are almost 100 lesson plans. They're all waiting for you to be downloaded. The LessonStream membership, it's a community. And so as well as getting access to all of these lesson plans, you also got access to the LessonStream story course. And there are a number of us present right now who are actually in the LessonStream membership. Looking at you, Kate, looking at you, Michael, looking at you, Andy, and a few others. If I've missed you out, just say hello now. In fact, if you're a member right now, maybe you should tell the rest of us why we should join. Chris, hello, Chris. Chris, should they join the LessonStream membership? What do you reckon? Honest opinion. Is it worth it? We've got the Fishbowl, which is the name of our online community. This is where the discussion happens. This is where we get involved with the story course. We ask questions, you network, you make friends, we have fun. There's also events, social events. We have guest webinars, we have storytelling events. Scott Thornbury did his very first talk on story. It was called Scott Talks Story, and it was a good talk. And you can access all of the recordings. And so you get all these things. You get the story course, you get the webinars, you get the Fishbowl community, and you get instant access to the entire lesson plan with a new lesson plan added most weeks for the price. It's still only $8.99 per month. That's a coffee per week. It's a very good value. Hannah, hello Hannah. I didn't see you there. Hannah's a member too. And Chris has just said, look what Chris has said. Love being a fish. If you're a LessonStream member, you're called a fish. And you love the varied lesson plan, something for every group. Now, thank you for that, Chris. Now, if you're thinking, I get a lot of emails from people saying they're interested in the LessonStream membership. They're thinking about joining, but is it for them? And Mihaela, if you're one of these people, because you've just said you'd like to, then what I suggest is there's a 3-week money back guarantee, okay? And I think this is the best way to do it. If you join and you have a look around, look at some of the lesson plans, etc., etc., and if you realize, or if you decide it's not for you, maybe it's not for your context, it's not quite right for any reason at all, just drop me an email. You've got 3 weeks after your sign up, and I will give you a refund. Okay, no questions asked. That I might ask you a question. I might say, I'd just be interested to know, just for my own feedback, but there will be no problem. I will not say, why, what's wrong with it, is what I mean. No questions asked, that's what I mean. So this is a 3-week money back guarantee, all right? So sign up, and if you feel for any reason at all, just get in touch with me within your first 3 weeks. Say, actually, I've tried it, it's not for me. I'll just go, bam, refund coming your way. All right. I think that's the best way to do it, rather than me to tell you what's in it, what's not, etc., etc. If you'd like to join, go to LessonStream.com, and you'll see that button there, join the membership. And if you're watching this and you're not actually if you don't receive the LessonStream updates and you'd like to receive information about the next LessonStream Live, for example, just click on yes, I'd like this lesson plan, and you will get information about the next LessonStream Lives. How does that sound? So, as I said, I've got one more story for you. It's 9 o'clock, so that is the main feature finished. But I'm going to finish with a story. Nothing to do with history, nothing to do with history teaching, just an anecdote, a story I wanted to tell you, a story that starts on Saturday, this Saturday past. I mentioned my little sister. I mentioned that she used to be a little shit. I mentioned that I've grown to like her. I think it's fair for me to say that she's no longer a little shit. She lives in Barcelona like me, and we're very close. And oh yes, sorry, getting distracted by your comments there. Chris says you get Kate's drawings because Kate is the LessonStream resident artist, and also Kate's mum, as Michael points out, is in a lesson plan. I'm not going to get distracted again. So yes, my sister lives in Barcelona. We hadn't seen each other since December because we both got COVID, but it was staggered, and so we managed to meet up for the first time on Saturday past. We went for dinner, and my sister brought a few of her friends along as well. One of them called, no, I'm not going to tell you his name, but one of his friends, we were talking about this new game, a new game that the world has become addicted to. I'm sure you know this game, right? Do you know the game I'm talking about? Who wakes up, reaches for their mobile phone, checks that there's not World War III, and then after they realize there's not World War III, they go on to exactly. Chris, is that is that a joke, Chris? Because you've called it wordless. Wordle, exactly. I don't play it because despite the fact I'm a language teacher, for some reason, I'm actually not very good at Wordle. For a start, it takes me ages to think of a word with 5 letters. I mean, honestly, I find it absolutely terrible. I can be staring at my screen. Countdown. Countdown has the 2 parts. I don't know if Countdown is international or not, but if you don't know Countdown, don't worry. There's the numbers part and there's the letters part. I'm terrible at the letters part, but I'm pretty good at the numbers part. Anyway, it doesn't matter if you don't know Countdown. The point is I am terrible at Wordle. And if you don't know Wordle, you will soon. The idea is you have to start with a 5-letter word. Okay, so you have to think of a 5-letter word. You put in any 5-letter word. Let's just say your word is price, Price. All right, and the mystery word that you're trying to guess, the Wordle computer will tell you how many letters in your word price are actually in the mystery word. So if the mystery word of the day has an I in it, it will tell you that. It'll tell you two things. It'll tell you if there's an I in the word, and it'll also tell you if you've got it in the right position. Now, it's complicated. If you don't understand that, it really doesn't matter. But we were all talking about Wordle, you see, and everybody was being very passionate about it. One of our friends that we were with at the dinner table said, "Oh, I read this interesting article about this woman who was kidnapped, and she managed to signal, she managed to get a message out to the world that she'd been kidnapped through Wordle." And I said, "Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. How did she do that?" And he said, "Well, I don't know exactly. I think maybe it was she just thought of certain words which were going to show the world that she'd been kidnapped." Now, I thought two things. This is number one, this is a fascinating story. Number two, whenever I come across a news story like this, I think lesson plan. And all the lesson plans in the LessonStream membership are story based, and this one is so potentially valuable because it's got this part. It's so topical. Everybody seems to be into Wordle. There's the rules, the explaining how it works, but also there's this question. Imagine you'd been kidnapped and you had to tell the world that you'd been kidnapped through your word choices in Wordle. And on the tram back from lunch that day, I hadn't been able to check the newspaper story yet because my phone was dead. But I started to think, what would be my word choices? How would I tell the world that I'd been kidnapped? And this was going to be my task. And this would be what I would give you. Let me show you. This is what you're going to think. This is clever. Okay. Okay, this is what Wordle looks like, and this would be my word choices. Number one, can you read that? Needs. Number two, helps. Needs helps. Helps, unfortunately, is third person singular, or it's not the noun. Because I couldn't put in just help, because it had to be 5 letters, you understand. So rather than saying needs help, needs helps. And of course, you'd have to be praying that one of these words is not actually the word of the day, because if one of those words had been the word of the day, I would not have been able to continue. Look at this next part. Can you work out young goats? Young goats. I was trying to say baby goats, but baby again, B-A-B-Y doesn't fit. So it came out young. B-A-B-I-E wouldn't have been a word. Babies. No, it had to be young goats. What are young goats? I know you know. Young goats are kids. So young goats are kids. Short sleep. What's a short sleep? Another word for a short sleep? A siesta. A nap. So young goats are kids. Short sleep is a nap. So kids nap, kidnap. So needs help, kidnap. Need help, kidnap. And the idea is that this would be my message going through to the world, that I'd been kidnapped, using Wordle to tell the world that I'd been kidnapped. And I thought that, I don't know if that would work, but I wonder if you're thinking what I was thinking, because all the time I'm thinking this, and I'm sure you're thinking the same, is, well, okay, who the hell's going to see this? It's not as if there's somebody at the other end of the Wordle line actually doing this manually, is it? It's not as if there's some sort of some person looking at our guesses going, okay, that's right, that's wrong. Oh, this is strange. This person's making some really weird guesses. And in any case, it's all done automatically. In any case, if this person who is kidnapped had access to Wordle, surely they'd have access to a mobile phone. So why would they not just call the police? And I'm going to look, you were all thinking this, weren't you? You were all thinking, what's this? This is a rubbish story. What's Jamie talking about? This is just ridiculous. And so once I got home, I checked out I checked out the story in the newspaper, and the story in the newspaper, it was such a letdown. It was such a letdown. I mean, the story has been reported in the media, maybe you've even seen it, literally dozens and dozens of times. You know, it's a story that maybe should have made the national media. I don't know if it should have gone global, but in every single headline, Wordle made an appearance. What had happened is this elderly woman was kidnapped in her own home. She was held prisoner. She went through quite a horrific ordeal, but every day she would text her daughter to see how her daughter got on with Wordle that day. And since her daughter hadn't heard from her, she got in touch with the police. So the whole media thinks this is a story about Wordle. And my friend at the dinner table that day had reported this story to us. And my sister and I kind of laughed about this. I think if there's a moral here, the moral is, or at least the moral should be, read past the headline. Don't you think? Read past the headline. Don't just read the headline and assume you know what the story is about. Read the story. And that's what I'm going to get in touch with this friend and point out the error of his ways. So that's the end of this session. Michael says Michael, have you met my little sister? Have we had her I don't know if we've had her in the LessonStream membership. Is that? I didn't know that countdown was original French. Chiffres et lettres. I didn't know that. So, yes, I hope the police are better than you are, because they wouldn't have got that, assuming the police have access to everybody's Wordle guesses. Kim says, who was the journalist in Florida who was a guest speaker talking about fact checking? That's right, that was Alex. I forget his second name. He would be very unhappy about this, wouldn't he? Anthony sent an email. Great, Anthony. Thanks so much. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Yes, we've got a new guest webinar this week on Friday with Ron Kirchie, who's the national poet, the poet laureate of South Pasadena, also a prolific writer of short stories, young adult fiction, and he's going to be joining us to tell us some stories and share some secrets on Sunday. So I'd love to see you there. If you're not a member yet in the LessonStream membership, do consider speaking. And the very last thing to say to you is please spread the word about these LessonStream events, okay? I do spend quite a bit of time preparing them and trying to make it valuable for you. And so if you've enjoyed it, please tell your teachers, please tell your colleagues. I'd be really appreciative of it. And I'm sure they will be too, all right? So a big thank you to all of you for spending this hour and 10 minutes with me. It's been lovely. And thank you for getting involved in the comments and the chat. And if you're in the membership, I'll see you in the fishbowl. All right. Thanks again. Have a great evening. If you haven't eaten yet, enjoy your dinner. Bye-bye.